the land. Sometimes the rumpled spread of it looks so random. Yet there is a pattern to our landscape. Begin at the Atlantic, at the continent's eastern shore. A broad plain rises from the great ocean. Just to the west, huddled mountains, low and rounded, worn down and old. Farther west, flatter land again, 1,000-mile expanse, rolling out straight and wide, and then rising. Until there are mountains again, loftier than before. 3 mighty ranges, the first steep and craggy, then after a long stretch of high country, a second towering range. And at the continent's western shore, a final lower wall of mountains, plunging into the wide Pacific. This is our land's grand design. Beside the Atlantic, the flatness of the coastal plain, a gentle climb into the Appalachian Mountains, flatter terrain in the central lowland. In the Great Plains, the beginnings of a slow, steady rise. Suddenly, a steep ascent into the Rocky Mountains. Then the high ground known as the Colorado Plateau, and farther west as Basin and Range. Up into a second great line of mountains, the Sierra Nevada. Lastly, the Pacific Mountain System, and its quick dive into the watery depths of the ocean. A rough portrait of a rough yet orderly landscape, viewed on a journey across the middle of the continent. There are exceptions to this pattern, but all across the continent, the primary features of our landscape form a distinct profile. It shapes our every experience, our everyday lives, on every day in the long life of our nation.
All those who have gone before us have left their marks on the land. So it is with the Native Americans. Their story reaches back centuries upon centuries when a land bridge linked Asia to North America. Wandering hunters from Asia made their way across that bridge, and they were the people who discovered America. Over thousands of years, their descendants spread through North America and then farther south. Across the continent, different landscapes shaped different ways of life. The eastern woodlands, the Native Americans of the eastern woodlands hunted in forests rich with game, fished the teeming rivers, and farmed the land. And when their crops had exhausted the soil, they moved on. The Great Plains, where the main fact of life was the buffalo. Across the open grasslands, small wandering bands stalked the grazing herds, using buffalo meat for food, bone for tools and weapons, and skins for clothing and shelter. The Southwest, dry and sun-drenched. The Native Americans of the Southwest built their homes in the steep, sheltering canyons and dug canals to irrigate their crops. The Northwest coast, a watery world, Native Americans thrived on the bounty of rivers and ocean. Distance and landscape and language separated the first peoples of North America. Yet they had some things in common. Most lived in small societies far apart. Some were nomadic, never staying in one place for long. So Native American ways of life did little to change the land permanently.
Christopher Columbus sailed from Spain in 1492. Wanted to reach Asia. Hit the Americas instead. Wanted to strike it rich. For himself. For Spain. Picked up a little gold. Didn't get rich. 1556. Philip II is king of Spain. Knows there's gold in the Americas. Wants it all. Elizabeth I, Queen of England. Like Philip, thinks of the Americas, thinks of making money. Philip and Elizabeth, rival leaders in a race to riches. For Europeans, the Americas are largely unexplored, unmapped, unbounded. To Native Americans, the land is home. To Europeans coming from a more crowded world, it's property. So the object is control. The Spanish got here early. In South America, they found gold. Ooh, lots of it. But the farther they got into North America, the less they found. Still, gold wasn't everything. Saving souls counted too, which meant spreading their religion. The result? The Spanish seized big chunks of the Americas. So why isn't this man smiling? He's got competition. The Portuguese, the Dutch. The French push into North America too. Don't find gold. Do find plenty of game, which means furs and piles of money. But it's not the French who scare Philip most. It's the English. Elizabeth, who starts out late but wants a cut of the action, who is ruthless, who has lots of useful friends. One of the best, Sir Walter Raleigh. Gentleman, scholar, pirate. Raleigh sets up Roanoke, England's first American outpost, perfect for raiding Spanish ships. Elizabeth figures piracy is profitable, settlement could be too. Settlers? Philip doesn't care. Piracy? Well, he's had enough. Wants to blow England out of the water. Thinks he's got the Navy to do it. Again, Elizabeth's friends make themselves useful. With Sir Francis Drake in command, England's Navy outmaneuvers the Spanish. It's the beginning of the end for Spain in North America. But England is on a roll. Gold is glamorous, piracy profitable. But over the long haul, settlement succeeds the most. After all, it puts the land to work. The race to riches in North America. Philip started first, but victory went to the slow and steely Elizabeth, and to the English from her day on.
America, a paradise of clear brooks and green forests, of rivers teeming with fish, a landscape lush and unbounded. One early settler, drawing in his first breath of America, wrote, "We smelled so sweet a smell as if we had been in some delicate garden." That was the dream.
The reality was different. In 1607, the English who settled Jamestown, Virginia, came ashore under a rain of arrows. In their first 5 years at Jamestown, 9 out of 10 settlers died from disease, from starvation, from attacks by Native Americans. Farther north, the English who settled Plymouth were blown onto the Massachusetts coast in 1620. Their first winter was colder than any they'd ever experienced. At one point, only 7 out of the original 100 settlers could stay on their feet to tend the sick and bury the dead. The dreams were quickly replaced by grim realities. To survive, the settlers had to learn how to live in a new land. That began with their neighbors, the Native Americans. Like anyone startled by strangers, some Native Americans were hostile, some helpful. Many were both in turn. The most helpful taught the settlers how to clear the dense forests for planting, how to fish with spears and braided traps. The Native Americans introduced the settlers to local sources of food and to tobacco. When Jamestown settlers began selling tobacco to England, they finally started to prosper. The settlers were adapting to a new world. So in both Jamestown and Plymouth, conditions gradually improved. Still, life remained brutal. Weather, disease, all the realities of frontier life continued to take their toll. And yet,
the dream endured, attracting wave after wave of European settlers, mostly landless, mainly poor. Dreaming of a better life, they followed in the footsteps of the first English settlers. And as the ships that brought them sailed away, each load of settlers hung on in America, learning a new landscape, making the best of the new world they found.
Work is strenuous in this new land. Most jobs involve cutting timber, felling oak trees, and clearing great tracts of forest, roots and all. Our Europeans who have been purchased must work hard all the time. For oak tree stumps are just as hard in America as they are in Germany. Only fools believe that in America, roasted pigeons are going to fly into their mouths without their having to work for them.
From the beginning, America meant a chance for a new life. For most Europeans, it meant their first chance to own land and to farm it for themselves. By the mid-1700s, there were more than 1 million settlers living in the 13 English colonies along the Atlantic coast, and most of them were farmers. So life was linked to the land, in rocky New England, in the southern colonies, where farms were bigger and slaves brought from Africa did most of the work. In the middle colonies, too, farming was the major way of life. But most people there farmed only as much land as their own labor and a bit of help could support. Free Americans with their own plots of land. In most places, this pattern worked well. So well that the small family farm soon became typical of the entire colonial world. Especially in Pennsylvania, the family farmer thrived. But even there, not all farmers were alike. As in other colonies, the more adventurous cleared only a small plot, and in a year or two, moved on. By the mid-1700s, settlements in the fast-growing Pennsylvania colony, as in many others, had spread westward. People settled mainly in the fertile valleys along streams and rivers, and new towns sprang up. Life got rougher as people pushed west, but the hardy farmers of the frontier liked the idea of even more land out west, no matter how wild. So, two streams in American life, settling down or moving on, began early. One relied on the family farm, the other was driven by a westward yearning. Both would last throughout our nation's history.
This spring, we planted about an acre of potatoes and a small piece of corn. All the work we did with the hoe. We had no plow, and our oxen strayed. My father left me on the 5th day of July to fetch my mother. Then began my solitary life. I had not a book, not a scrap of printed paper. Each day I cut a notch on the door, and on Sabbath one of double size. Thus I kept tally of the days and weeks, and often counted the notches to pass the time which hung so heavy. Every night the wolves howled around my cabin, and the owls hooted.
Cities. They spring up in most every society as centers of transportation, as places where people conduct business and pick up news and views of the world. In the days before airplanes or even good roads, a harbor was the starting point for a city. In the colonies, all the major cities were ports: Boston, New York, Philadelphia, Charleston. These cities were major stops for trading ships, which often followed a roughly triangular route. American cities were also ports of entry for immigrants and points of departure to the wilderness of the West. Of these four cities, Boston was the most English. In a region they call New England, colonists tried to create an improved version of the land they left behind. With its wandering streets and close-set houses, it strongly reminded visitors of London, except Boston was cleaner. New York had the best harbor in the colonies. Established by the Dutch as New Amsterdam in 1626, it was renamed New York when the English took over in 1664. Even then, the island city was unruly, a melting pot of cultures. The sounds of English and Dutch and many other languages filled the crowded streets. Philadelphia was the largest American city. It was settled by Quakers, a religious group that prized order and hard work. The city's neatly laid out streets, the well-made brick buildings, the shops opening for business at dawn, all reflected the Quaker influence. And the best roads in the colonies linked Philadelphia to the market towns of the frontier. Charleston was the smallest of the four. It was the only city of size in the South, a region dominated by large, self-sufficient plantations. but plantation owners were drawn by Charleston's high life and its slave market. Thousands of slaves were brought into Charleston's harbor. In the mid-1700s, American cities grew fast, spilling out into the countryside. Although only 5% of the population lived there, the cities carried on a lively trade in both goods and ideas. Country people came and went, mixing with city folk, reading papers, soaking up the talk. And as time passed, more and more of that city talk focused on independence. The first object that saluted my eyes when I arrived on the coast was a slave ship, which was then riding at anchor and waiting for its cargo. I was persuaded that I had gotten into a world of bad spirits, and they were going to kill me. When I looked around the ship, too, I saw a large furnace, boiling, and a multitude of black people of every description chained together. I no longer doubted my fate. I asked if we were not to be eaten by those white men with horrible looks, red faces, and loose hair.
The mid-1700s. I was a lawyer born in England, but living and prospering here in Boston. By then, England and her American colonies had enjoyed close ties for more than a century. Yet a wide ocean separated the two. That wasn't the only distance between them. On one side of the Atlantic, the colonists, who had made a home out of a wilderness, who had, for the most part, never even seen faraway England. On the other side, the mother country, beginning to rein in the colonies to keep them on a shorter leash. England was laying down the law. Why? The colonists were growing more independent. England didn't want to lose control. My first loyalties were to King George, of course, and, to be fair, the mother country had had a lot on her mind. For years, England had fought with France for control over parts of North America. The English victory in 1763 brought distractions, more territory, and a staggering debt from the war. Still, England felt it was time to exert its authority, and to help pay off that debt, to start taxing the colonies. The first show of authority came with the Proclamation of 1763, which drew a line along the Appalachian Mountains and announced that the colonists could not settle west of it. It was easy for me to understand this. Mainly, England wanted to keep peace with our red brethren, who didn't want colonists moving any farther into their lands. But the frontier types didn't agree. England had taken away what they regarded as their God-given right to keep moving west. The taxes England imposed had an even wider effect, partly because the colonies had no voice in the government that levied them. Now, men I knew and admired began to speak out. George Washington said that the English had no more right to put their hands into my pockets without my consent than I have to put my hands into yours. More and more colonists agreed. A good number of tax collectors got themselves tarred and feathered for their trouble. England repealed the taxes, but then she made another show of authority, this time taxing basic items such as paper and tea. Worse yet, England also stationed troops in Boston. With that, even I began to feel angry. It was not so much a question of law. England was within her rights. It was more a matter of justice. Once again, the English repealed most of the taxes. For a time, hotheads on both sides cooled down, and many of us were encouraged when colonial leaders sent a petition to England hoping to resolve our differences. But the king refused to read it, saying, "Old England will make her rebellious children rule the day they cast off obedience." It was remarks like that that changed minds all over America, including my own. A minority of Americans, but a very vocal one, had had enough. Soon, skirmishes broke out between colonists and English soldiers. I found myself pushing for the Americans. And when colonial leaders got together in the summer of 1776 in Philadelphia, my heart was with them, not with the king. When I heard that those 56 men had signed their names to a document called the Declaration of Independence, I cheered. To England, they were rascals, outlaws. To me, they were heroes. But I'm getting carried away. After all, only a third of the colonists supported the drive for independence. Still, there was no turning back. Separated by a wide ocean shaped by a new land, the colonists had become different people from the English. And we had finally set out on our own course, determined to chart our own way.